In 1963, Jane Roberts was a complete skeptic who mocked psychic phenomena in her writing. Then something impossible happened. During a casual Ouija board session, she began speaking in a deep male voice, claiming to be an entity named Seth. What followed defied every scientific explanation. Jane started speaking fluent ancient Greek, a language she'd never studied. Linguists at Yale confirmed her pronunciation, and grammar were flawless. But that was just the beginning. Seth described classified CIA operations in exact detail. Years before declassification, he predicted earthquakes to the day, diagnosed medical conditions doctors missed, and revealed state secrets so accurately that the CIA opened a file specifically tracking this entity. The most shocking incident involved Dr. Eugene Barnard, a Yale psychologist who tested Jane extensively. Seth suddenly recited Barnard's deceased mother's final words in perfect Russian. Jane couldn't speak Russian. Barnard had never shared those words with anyone. 20 years of documentation, hundreds of witnesses, zero evidence of fraud. But Seth's most extraordinary revelations weren't predictions. They were about the fundamental structure of reality itself, and how we create our experience in ways that would revolutionize everything we think we know about existence. Now, as extraordinary as Jane Roberts' documented abilities were, speaking ancient languages she'd never learned, revealing archaeological details later proven accurate, what Seth actually taught through her was far more radical than any psychic phenomenon. Because Seth didn't just demonstrate that consciousness could transcend physical limitations, he completely inverted our understanding of reality itself. Everything you've been taught about how the world works is backwards. We're told that physical matter is primary, that solid objects exist independently, that circumstances shape our experience, that we're essentially biological machines responding to external stimuli. Seth revealed this is precisely inverted. Consciousness doesn't emerge from matter. Consciousness creates matter. Think of it like this. Your consciousness operates exactly like a movie projector. The projector itself is your awareness, the fundamental creative force. Your beliefs, assumptions, and deep-seated convictions function as the slides. And physical reality? That's simply the screen where these beliefs get projected and become your lived experience. Here's where this gets profound. Most people spend their entire lives trying to change what's happening on the screen. They're essentially standing in front of a movie theater, painting over the projected image, wondering why the same scenes keep appearing. You can paint over that screen all day long, work harder, try different strategies, force external changes, but as long as the same slide remains in the projector, the same image will keep appearing. Jane Roberts herself initially struggled with this concept. As a rational, skeptical writer, she couldn't accept that her consciousness was literally creating her physical circumstances. But Seth provided her with specific experiments. He had her focus intensely on changing her beliefs about money rather than taking external actions to earn more. Within weeks, unexpected checks arrived, publishing opportunities materialized, and her financial situation transformed in ways that defied conventional explanation. The scientific community has been quietly discovering evidence for this consciousness creates reality model for decades. Quantum physics has documented the observer effect, the fact that conscious observation literally determines how subatomic particles behave. The famous double-slit experiment shows that electrons exist as waves of possibility until consciousness observes them, at which point they collapse into specific measurable particles. Your act of conscious observation doesn't just witness reality, it determines which reality manifests. But we're not just talking about subatomic particles. Princeton University's Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory spent nearly 3 decades documenting how human consciousness directly influences physical systems. Their random event generators, machines that should produce completely random outputs, consistently deviated from randomness when human operators focused specific intentions on them. The odds against these results occurring by chance were billions to 1. Dr. Masaru Emoto's water crystal experiments provided another striking demonstration. When people directed specific thoughts and emotions toward water samples, the molecular structure of the water physically changed. Positive intentions created beautiful, symmetrical crystal formations. Negative intentions produced chaotic, fragmented structures. Since human bodies are roughly 70% water, imagine the implications. Seth explained that every single element of your current life experience, your relationships, financial situation, health, opportunities, even the people you encounter, exists because your consciousness called it into being. Your beliefs about worthiness determine the quality of relationships that appear in your experience. Your deep convictions about scarcity or abundance directly manifest as your financial circumstances. I've seen this play out countless times. People with deeply held beliefs about their unworthiness consistently attract partners who treat them poorly, not because they consciously choose bad relationships, but because their consciousness is projecting that unworthiness belief and creating matching circumstances. Someone convinced that money doesn't grow on trees, or you have to work hard for everything, will find their reality consistently reflecting those limitations, no matter how much effort they apply. But here's the question that immediately arises. If we're truly powerful creators, why isn't everyone living an amazing life? Why do we experience struggle, limitation, and suffering? Seth's answer was both liberating and disturbing. We are indeed powerful creators, but we're creating from a contaminated blueprint. We've been programmed with beliefs that generate limitation, struggle, and dependence. It's like having incredible creative software that's been infected with malicious code. The creative power remains intact, but it's operating from corrupted programming. Consider how this programming manifests. Someone raised with beliefs like money is the root of all evil, or rich people are greedy, will unconsciously sabotage financial opportunities. Their consciousness literally repels wealth because their belief system has labeled it as negative. They're creating perfectly, creating exactly what their programmed beliefs dictate. The same pattern applies to health. People programmed to believe that illness is inevitable, that it runs in the family, or that aging necessarily means deterioration, will manifest those exact experiences. Their consciousness faithfully creates circumstances matching those beliefs. What makes this particularly insidious is that these limiting beliefs feel completely natural and true. They've been reinforced through repetition, social conditioning, and apparent evidence. But that evidence is actually the result of the beliefs themselves, a perfect closed loop that maintains the illusion. Seth taught that recognizing this consciousness creates reality principle is the first step toward reclaiming your creative power. But he also warned that those who benefit from humanity operating from limited dependent programming have sophisticated methods for maintaining these belief systems. Some of Seth's most profound revelations about consciousness manipulation are too sensitive to share openly on YouTube. That's why we've compiled them in our free Insights Academy newsletter, where you can also receive a complimentary copy of the Kybalion for a limited time. Because once you truly understand that your consciousness is the projector creating your reality, the next logical question becomes, who or what has been controlling the slides? How did these limiting beliefs get installed so thoroughly that they feel like natural truth? And why does our entire social system seem designed to reinforce these limitations? Seth's answers to these questions reveal a level of systematic programming that goes far deeper than most people imagine. The very institutions we trust to educate and inform us may actually be the primary mechanisms through which our creative power gets redirected and constrained. Now, if you've been following along from Jane Roberts' extraordinary case, and Seth's revelations about consciousness creating reality, you're probably starting to wonder, if we truly have this incredible creative power, why do most people feel so powerless? Why are we struggling financially, emotionally, spiritually? Seth's answer cuts right to the heart of human experience. We've been systematically programmed to believe in our own limitations. Think about a computer virus for a moment. It doesn't destroy the hardware. The machine itself remains perfectly capable. Instead, it corrupts the software, the operating instructions that tell the computer what it can and cannot do. Seth describes something remarkably similar happening to human consciousness, what he calls a psychic virus of limitation that gets installed in our minds from the moment we're born. This isn't some abstract philosophical concept. Seth explains that beliefs aren't just thoughts floating around in your head. They're energetic commands that your consciousness uses as blueprints for creating physical reality. When you deeply believe, "I'll never have enough money," your consciousness interprets that as an instruction manual and begins projecting experiences that match that expectation. But here's where it gets fascinating and disturbing at the same time. This programming doesn't happen by accident. From the moment you could understand language, you were being fed a steady diet of limiting beliefs, each one designed to keep you operating within very specific boundaries. Let's examine some of the most powerful ones. Money is the root of all evil. How many times did you hear that growing up? Seth points out that this belief system serves a very specific function. It keeps people psychologically comfortable with having less. If money is evil, then being poor becomes virtuous, and you'll unconsciously sabotage any opportunity to accumulate wealth. The result? A population that accepts wage slavery as moral necessity. Or consider this gem. Don't get your hopes up. Sounds like practical advice, right? Protecting yourself from disappointment. Seth reveals this as perhaps the most insidious programming of all. It's literally an instruction to surrender your dreams before you even try. When you don't get your hopes up, you don't put real energy behind your desires. And without that energy, your consciousness has no clear instructions for what reality to create. The brilliance of this system becomes clear when you realize it's completely self-reinforcing. Someone programmed with scarcity beliefs will experience scarcity, which then proves to them that scarcity is real, which strengthens the belief, which creates more scarcity. It's a closed loop that can run for an entire lifetime. But who benefits from keeping people trapped in these loops? Seth's teachings reveal something that might surprise you. This isn't necessarily some shadowy conspiracy with people in dark rooms plotting humanity's downfall. It's actually the natural result of consciousness creating reality, combined with the fact that some people understand this principle and others don't. Throughout history, ruling classes have always understood that controlling ideas is far more effective than controlling through force. The Roman Empire knew that gladiator games and bread and circuses kept the population distracted and compliant. Medieval churches knew that convincing people their suffering was God's will prevented rebellion. Modern institutions have simply refined these techniques. Consider how the education system operates. You sit in rows, you don't speak unless spoken to, you memorize information without questioning it, and you're trained to seek approval from authority figures. Seth points out that this isn't education, it's domestication. You're being trained to be a good employee, not a creative, independent thinker. The media amplifies this programming exponentially. Every story about economic hardship, every narrative about how realistic people accept limitations, every celebration of people who sacrifice their dreams for responsibility. These aren't just news stories or entertainment. They're energetic transmissions beaming limiting beliefs directly into the collective consciousness. Corporate culture perfects the process. You're taught to be grateful for whatever job you can get, to never ask for too much, to accept that that's just how the world works. Meanwhile, the people running these systems understand exactly how consciousness creates reality, and they use that knowledge to maintain their position. Seth explains that this creates what he calls mass hypnosis, entire populations walking around in a trance, believing their limitations are real, never questioning whether the cage they're in actually has a door. The most sophisticated part of this programming is how it disguises itself as wisdom. Be realistic, don't be greedy. Good things come to those who wait. These sound like mature, responsible attitudes, but Seth reveals them as psychological handcuffs designed to keep you from accessing your true creative power. Even family systems, often unconsciously, perpetuate these patterns. Parents who are programmed with limitation pass those same beliefs to their children, thinking they're protecting them from disappointment. We're not rich people. People like us don't get those opportunities. Don't think you're better than everyone else. Each statement is an energetic command that shapes what that child's consciousness will create as an adult. The religious programming runs even deeper. The idea that you're born sinful, that you need to suffer to be worthy, that worldly success is somehow spiritually suspect. Seth shows how these beliefs create a population that's psychologically prepared to accept less than they deserve. But here's what makes Seth's analysis so powerful. He's not saying this programming is evil or that the people perpetuating it are necessarily malicious. He's explaining that in a reality where consciousness creates experience, those who understand the rules will naturally end up in positions of power over those who don't. The breakthrough comes when you realize that becoming aware of the programming is the first step toward freedom. Once you can see the invisible prison bars, you can start to dissolve them. Seth teaches that these beliefs only have power over you as long as they remain unconscious. The moment you drag them into the light of awareness, they begin to lose their grip. This is why certain information gets suppressed or ridiculed. It's not that there's necessarily someone actively trying to hide it. It's that a system built on people believing in their limitations will naturally resist anything that threatens those limitations. The most radical act you can perform is to start questioning the beliefs you've never questioned. To ask yourself, what if everything I've been taught about what's possible is wrong? Because Seth's teachings suggest something extraordinary, that every limitation you accept, every boundary you believe in, every reason you give for why you can't have what you want, these aren't facts about reality. They're simply programs running in your consciousness, and programs can be changed. In our next section, we're going to explore exactly how to identify these limiting programs in your own mind and begin the process of rewriting them. Because once you understand the architecture of mental programming, you can start building something entirely different. Look, after spending years studying Seth's material and working with thousands of people trying to break free from psychological conditioning, I've discovered that most humans face one fundamental problem. They've confused their identity with their programming. They think they are their job title, their past mistakes, their family role, their age, their limitations. But here's what Seth understood that most spiritual teachers miss completely. You can't transform what you're unconsciously identified with. This brings us to what I call the blank slate protocol, and it's probably the most confronting technique you'll ever encounter. Why? Because it asks you to temporarily dissolve every single thing you think you are. Most people would rather stay miserable in a familiar identity than experience the temporary disorientation of not knowing who they are. But here's the thing, that disorientation isn't dangerous, it's liberation. Seth explained consciousness like this. Imagine you're an actor who's been wearing the same costume for so long, you've forgotten it's just clothing. You think the costume is you, the businessman's suit, the struggling single mother outfit, the victim of circumstances uniform. These aren't your identity, they're just roles consciousness is playing. The blank slate protocol systematically removes every costume until you're standing in pure awareness. And from that space, you can consciously choose who to become, rather than unconsciously repeating who you've been programmed to be. Here's how it works, and I'm going to give you the exact process I've refined over decades of practice. Find a quiet space where you won't be disturbed for at least 20 minutes. Sit comfortably. This isn't about physical discomfort, it's about psychological expansion. Close your eyes and begin breathing naturally. Don't try to control anything yet. Now comes the systematic dissolution. Start with your name, that label your parents gave you before you could speak. It's just sound waves. Let it dissolve. You're not that name. Next, release your age, that number based on how many times Earth has circled the sun since your birth. Completely arbitrary. You're not that number. Continue with your gender, your profession, your relationship status, your nationality. Each one is just a category society uses to organize and predict human behavior. You're not any of these labels. Here's where it gets interesting. Release your personal history, those memories of what happened to you, what you achieved, what you failed at. They're just data points. They're not who you are. This is usually where people panic because they think, but my experiences made me who I am. No, your identification with those experiences created a character you've been playing. Keep going. Dissolve your beliefs about what's possible for you, your personality traits, your likes and dislikes. Even release the concept of being human. You're not a biological organism having a spiritual experience. Your consciousness itself, temporarily focused through a human nervous system. What remains when everything dissolves? Pure awareness, consciousness without content, the space in which all experience arises and passes away. This is what Seth called your inner self, the part of you that exists beyond all programming and conditioning. Most people experience this state as simultaneously empty and infinitely full, empty of all the familiar reference points, but full of unlimited potential. You might feel like you're floating in space or merging with everything, or simply resting in profound stillness. Some people get scared because the ego interprets this dissolution as death. It's not death, it's birth. From this blank slate awareness, ask yourself the most important question you'll ever contemplate. If I could create myself from scratch, knowing what I know now, who would I choose to be? Don't rush this. Let the answers emerge from the silence rather than thinking them up. The responses that arise from this space represent your authentic self speaking, the version of you that exists beyond societal programming and family conditioning. You might discover you want to be someone completely different from who you've been. Maybe you've been playing the responsible one when you're actually meant to be an artist. Maybe you've been the victim when you're meant to be a creator. Maybe you've been small when you're meant to be magnificent. The beautiful thing about this process is that the answers feel true in your body, not just logical in your mind. Your authentic self has a different energetic signature than your programmed personality. It feels more alive, more expansive, more genuinely you. Now, I need to address the resistance you're probably feeling right now. The ego is terrified of this process because its entire job is maintaining the familiar identity structure. It will tell you this is dangerous, that you need your labels to function, that you'll lose yourself forever. This is just fear talking. Your personality doesn't disappear. It becomes a tool you can consciously use rather than an unconscious prison you're trapped in. You can put on the professional identity when needed, the parent role when appropriate, the friend persona when desired, but you're no longer unconsciously identified with any of them. For those new to this work, start with shorter sessions, maybe 5 or 10 minutes of dissolving just a few identity layers. As you become more comfortable with the process, you can go deeper and stay longer in that blank slate awareness. Seth taught that we're actually exploring multiple probable selves simultaneously, different versions of who we could become based on the choices we make. The blank slate protocol allows you to consciously connect with these other potential selves and choose which ones to develop. This isn't just meditation, it's identity archaeology. You're excavating your authentic self from beneath layers of conditioning. And once you've tasted that freedom, that sense of infinite possibility, you can never go back to unconsciously accepting limitations as truth. The goal isn't to stay in blank slate awareness permanently, it's to access it regularly so you can make conscious choices about who you're becoming rather than unconsciously repeating who you've been programmed to be. Practice this protocol for the next 7 days, even if it's just for 5 minutes each time. Document what emerges when you ask that crucial question about who you'd choose to be. This information will become essential for what we're covering next: how to manipulate your relationship with time and memory to accelerate your transformation. Because once you realize identity is fluid, you're ready to discover that time itself is far more flexible than you've been taught to believe. Now we're going to dive into what might be Seth's most mind-bending teaching, something so radical that it challenges everything you've been told about time, memory, and the nature of reality itself. After you've begun to clear your mental slate, as we discussed in the previous section, you're ready for what Seth calls revision, the practice of literally rewriting your past. I know how this sounds. Your rational mind is probably screaming right now. The past is fixed. What happened, happened. But here's where Seth's teachings get fascinating, because they align perfectly with what quantum physicists are discovering about the nature of time itself. According to Seth, time isn't the linear progression we experience, past, present, future, marching in a straight line. Instead, all moments exist simultaneously in what he calls the spacious present. Think of it like a vast library where every book exists at once, and consciousness simply moves its attention from one book to another, creating the illusion of sequential reading. This isn't just mystical speculation. Quantum physics has shown us that at the subatomic level, particles can influence their own past states. The famous delayed choice quantum eraser experiments demonstrate that decisions made in the present can retroactively determine what happened in the past. If this is true at the quantum level, Seth argues, why wouldn't it apply to consciousness and memory? Here's the practical breakthrough. Your memories don't exist back there in some fixed historical moment. They exist right now, in your present consciousness, as living, dynamic energy patterns. And like any other mental content, they can be altered. Seth taught a specific protocol for this that starts simple but goes remarkably deep. Every night before sleep, you review your day in reverse order, from the moment you're lying in bed backward to the moment you woke up. This reverse review breaks what Seth calls the linear time hypnosis that keeps us trapped in cause and effect thinking. As you move backward through your day, you identify any moments that felt negative, frustrating, or limiting. Maybe you had an awkward conversation with your boss. Perhaps you felt embarrassed in a social situation. Instead of just remembering these events, you stop and consciously rewrite them. Let's say you stumbled over your words during an important presentation. In your revision, you see yourself speaking clearly and confidently. You feel the audience's positive response. You experience your own sense of competence and ease. The key is to make this new version emotionally real, not just a fantasy, but a felt experience that carries the same emotional weight as the original memory. This isn't positive thinking or denial. Seth explains it as quantum recalibration. Every event exists as a probability pattern with multiple potential outcomes. The version you originally experienced became dominant because of your beliefs and expectations at the time. But since all probable versions still exist in the quantum field, you can withdraw your energy from the failure probability and invest it in the success probability. The deeper level of this practice involves going back to childhood memories, the foundational experiences that shaped your core beliefs about yourself and the world. Seth taught that you can enter a meditative state and consciously revisit these formative periods, rewriting entire chapters of your early life. I've worked with people who transformed memories of harsh, critical parents into experiences of unconditional love and support. Someone who grew up feeling unwanted might revise their childhood to feel deeply cherished and valued. The mechanism works because these memories exist in present consciousness, not in some unreachable past. One woman I know used this technique to address a pattern of feeling invisible in groups. She traced it back to being consistently overlooked as the middle child in a large family. Through revision, she rewrote those childhood scenes, seeing herself being heard, valued, and celebrated for her unique contributions. Within months, her entire social dynamic shifted. She began naturally taking up space in conversations, offering ideas confidently, and attracting the recognition she'd always craved. The skeptical mind wants to know, but didn't those original events really happen? Seth's answer challenges our fundamental assumptions about reality. If all moments exist simultaneously, then the original version has no more claim to being real than any other version. The only thing that makes one version dominant is where you place your conscious attention and emotional investment. Think about how memory actually works. You're not accessing some perfect recording of past events. Every time you remember something, you're reconstructing it based on your current beliefs, emotions, and expectations. Neuroscience confirms this. Memories are remarkably plastic and change each time they're recalled. Seth simply makes this process conscious and intentional. Instead of unconsciously distorting memories based on current fears and limitations, you deliberately reshape them to support your highest potential. The emotional alchemy required for effective revision is crucial. You can't just intellectually imagine a different scenario. You have to feel the new version so completely that it becomes your dominant emotional memory of that event. This often means experiencing genuine grief for the original painful memory, while simultaneously allowing yourself to feel the joy, love, or confidence of the revised version. This practice can radically alter personality structure because personality is largely built on the foundation of formative experiences. Change those foundational memories, and you change the entire structure built upon them. Someone who carries shame from childhood criticism might revise those experiences into memories of encouragement and support, fundamentally shifting their relationship with their own capabilities. Seth connects this to his teaching about probable selves, versions of you that made different choices and had different experiences. Through revision, you're not creating fiction, you're accessing and embodying the probable self who experienced the supportive, empowering version of events. The most profound aspect of this practice is how it demonstrates your fundamental creative power over your own experience. Once you realize that even your past is malleable, the future becomes a completely open canvas. You're no longer trapped by what happened to you. You become the conscious author of your own story, writing and rewriting until it serves your highest evolution. Tomorrow night, try the basic protocol. Review your day in reverse. Find one moment that felt limiting or negative, and consciously rewrite it with a better outcome. Feel the new version as completely as possible. You might be surprised by how quickly external circumstances begin to shift when you change the energetic structure of your memories. Now we're entering territory that completely redefines what you think you know about consciousness itself. After mastering the blank slate protocol and learning to revise your past, you're ready for what Seth called the most profound truth about human existence. You're not living just one life. You're living thousands of them, simultaneously, right now. Every single choice you make creates what Seth termed a probable self, a complete, fully realized version of you exploring that alternate path. When you chose your career, got married, moved to a new city, or even decided what to eat for breakfast this morning, other versions of you made different choices. And here's what most people can't wrap their heads around. Those other versions aren't hypothetical. They're as real as you are, living complete lives in parallel dimensions of reality. Think about a major decision you made 5 years ago. Maybe you took a job in one city instead of another. There's a version of you right now who took that other job, built different relationships, developed different skills, faced different challenges. That version of you has knowledge, experiences, and capabilities that your current self doesn't possess. And according to Seth's teachings, you can access all of it. This is what he called quantum downloading, the ability to consciously connect with your probable selves and download their knowledge, skills, and even their vibrational frequencies directly into your current reality. It sounds impossible until you understand the mechanics of consciousness itself. Your individual awareness is like a radio tuned to one station, but the airwaves are filled with countless other frequencies. Each probable self exists on a slightly different frequency of reality. The key is learning to adjust your consciousness to receive transmissions from these other versions of yourself. The practical application is staggering. Imagine connecting with the probable self who became incredibly successful in business, downloading their strategies and decision-making patterns, or accessing the version of you who mastered a skill you're struggling with, absorbing their muscle memory and understanding. This isn't visualization or wishful thinking. It's accessing your own expanded consciousness across dimensional boundaries. Here's the quantum download protocol Seth outlined. First, enter a deeply relaxed state, but maintain conscious awareness. You're not trying to fall asleep. You're shifting your consciousness into what Seth called the between state, where dimensional barriers become permeable. Once you're there, issue a specific command to connect with the probable self who has already achieved what you desire. The specificity matters enormously. Don't just ask to connect with a successful version of yourself. Command connection with the probable self who built a 7-figure business in your exact field, or the one who healed from the specific health condition you're facing, or the version who created the exact type of relationship you want. The more precise your request, the clearer the transmission. Then you issue your download request. Ask for specific knowledge. Show me the exact steps you took to build your business. Request strategies. What decisions did you make differently that led to your success? access. Most importantly, ask for vibrational downloads. Let me feel what it's like to operate from your level of confidence and certainty. The transmission comes through three primary channels. First, dream communications filled with actionable symbolism. These aren't ordinary dreams. They contain specific information you can implement immediately. You might dream of detailed business strategies, creative solutions to current problems, or clear guidance about relationships and health decisions. Second, spontaneous insights that appear as moments of genius. You're going about your day when suddenly you have a crystal clear understanding of exactly what to do next. These aren't random thoughts. They're direct downloads from probable selves who've already navigated similar situations successfully. Third, intuitive impulses to take specific actions. You feel compelled to call someone, attend an event, or pursue an opportunity that logically doesn't make sense. When you follow these impulses, they lead to exactly the outcomes your probable self experienced. But here's where most people sabotage the entire process. The ego acts like a firewall, trying to block these downloads. It rationalizes away the insights, dismisses the dreams as fantasy, and creates logical arguments against following intuitive impulses. The bypass is immediate action without rationalization. When you receive a download, implement it before your analytical mind can interfere. One of the most powerful applications is what Seth called the preview technique. Before making any major decision, connect with the probable self who chose each option and preview the outcomes. You can literally experience what your life will be like if you take the job, marry the person, or move to the new city. This isn't guesswork. You're accessing actual probable futures and choosing consciously which reality to manifest. Recognizing authentic downloads versus wishful thinking requires discernment. Real downloads have four characteristics: absolute clarity about specific actions to take, detailed information you couldn't have known intellectually, actionable steps that feel completely natural to implement, and measurable results when you follow the guidance. I've witnessed remarkable examples of successful downloads. A struggling entrepreneur connected with her probable self who'd built $1 million company downloaded the exact marketing strategy and implemented it to triple her revenue within 6 months. A man facing serious health issues accessed the probable self who'd healed completely, received specific dietary and lifestyle guidance, and experienced full recovery using methods his doctors had never suggested. The deeper truth Seth revealed is that your greater soul is the sum total of all your probable experiences across all dimensions. When you're downloading from probable selves, you're not accessing external sources. You're connecting with your own expanded consciousness. Every skill, every piece of knowledge, every possible achievement already exists within your multidimensional being. This understanding completely transforms how you approach goals and challenges. Instead of trying to figure everything out from your limited current perspective, you can access the wisdom of selves who've already solved every problem you're facing. The knowledge, strategies, and even the emotional states of absolute confidence and certainty are already yours. You just need to tune into the right frequency. Start tonight with a simple download request. Connect with the probable self who's already living your ideal life and ask for one specific piece of guidance. Then watch for the transmission through dreams, insights, or impulses over the next 48 hours. What we're building toward is even more extraordinary: the ability to manipulate the very coordinates of time and space themselves. Now we get to one of Seth's most practical and powerful teachings, something that sounds like science fiction but operates on principles you can test tonight. Seth called them coordinate points, and understanding this concept literally changes how you interact with reality itself. Think of coordinate points as energetic vortices where the usual rules of manifestation get supercharged. These aren't mystical fairy tale locations. They're specific intersections in time and space where your thoughts crystallize into physical reality with amplified speed and precision. The membrane between your inner world and outer experience becomes incredibly thin at these points. Here's what blew my mind when I first grasped this. We encounter these coordinate points constantly, but most people rush right through them completely unaware. It's like having access to a high-speed internet connection, but still using dial-up because nobody told you how to plug in properly. Seth identified two primary categories of coordinate points: temporal and geographic. Let's start with temporal ones, because you can access these immediately. The most powerful temporal coordinate point happens twice daily, in those twilight states right before sleep and immediately upon waking. Your conscious mind hasn't fully engaged its filtering mechanisms yet, so your subconscious remains highly accessible. This isn't just about being relaxed. There's an actual neurological shift happening where your brain waves move into theta frequency, the same state experienced by advanced meditators. I started experimenting with this after reading Seth's material. Instead of grabbing my phone first thing in the morning, I'd lie still for those precious minutes and consciously direct my thoughts toward what I wanted to experience that day. The results were undeniable. Synchronicities multiplied. Opportunities appeared from nowhere. Problems that seemed insurmountable suddenly had obvious solutions. Another temporal coordinate point occurs during what psychologists call flow states. Those those moments when you're completely absorbed in creative activity and time seems to disappear. Musicians know this feeling when improvising. Writers experience it when words pour onto the page effortlessly. Athletes describe being in the zone. During these states, you're literally operating from a different level of consciousness where normal limitations dissolve. But here's where it gets really interesting. Moments of pure love or gratitude create instant coordinate points. When you feel genuine appreciation or unconditional love, you're vibrating at what Seth called the creation frequency. Your entire electromagnetic field shifts, and reality becomes incredibly responsive to your intentions. Deep meditation that touches source consciousness represents perhaps the most potent temporal coordinate point. You're not just relaxing, you're accessing the fundamental creative force that structures reality itself. Seth taught that in these states, you can literally rewrite the probability patterns that will manifest as your future experiences. Geographic coordinate points are equally fascinating. Ancient sacred sites weren't chosen randomly. Our ancestors could sense these energetic vortices. Stonehenge, the pyramids, Machu Picchu, these locations amplify human consciousness in measurable ways. Modern research has confirmed unusual electromagnetic properties at many of these sites. But you don't need to travel to sacred sites. Natural power spots exist everywhere. Certain locations where underground water crosses, specific elevations, even particular rooms in your house that just feel different. I've noticed this in my own home. There's one corner of my living room where creative ideas flow effortlessly, where problems seem to solve themselves if I just sit quietly and allow solutions to emerge. Learning to identify coordinate points becomes a practical skill. Watch for palpable energy shifts, that feeling when you walk into a space and immediately sense something different. Notice increased synchronicities clustering around certain times or places. Pay attention to where you receive profound intuitive downloads or experience creative breakthroughs. Once you recognize these patterns, you can begin working with them intentionally. This brings us to one of Seth's most advanced techniques, the time expansion directive. Seth taught that consciousness operates beyond linear, temporal constraints. What we experience as time is largely a perceptual construct. At coordinate points, you can manipulate this perception to experience hours of subjective time within minutes of clock time. This isn't metaphorical, it's a learnable skill with practical applications. Here's the step-by-step process Seth outlined. First, set a clear intention for what you want to accomplish during the expanded time period. Maybe you need to solve a complex problem, do deep healing work, or explore creative possibilities. Next, find a coordinate point. Early morning works well for beginners. Sit comfortably and imagine time beginning to slow down around you. Don't force this. Allow your consciousness to naturally shift into a more expansive state. Then comes the crucial part. Allow your awareness to explore the task or question in this expanded temporal space. Your consciousness can examine multiple approaches, test various solutions, even consult with your probable selves we discussed earlier. What feels like hours of deep work might occupy only 20 minutes of clock time. I've used this technique for everything from preparing presentations to working through emotional issues. The quality of insight available in these expanded states far exceeds normal analytical thinking. You're accessing information from multiple levels of your being simultaneously. The practical applications are extraordinary. Rapid learning becomes possible when you can subjectively experience extended study periods in compressed time. Deep healing work that might normally require months can be accomplished in weeks. Creative problem solving reaches levels that seem almost supernatural. Complex projects that overwhelm your normal consciousness become manageable when you can step into expanded time and examine them from multiple angles. I've watched people resolve relationship conflicts, develop business strategies, and even heal physical ailments using these techniques. But here's what really matters. This knowledge was deliberately hidden from us. Maintaining control requires keeping people unaware of their creative power. If everyone understood coordinate points and time expansion, the entire structure of limitation and scarcity would collapse overnight. Educational systems never teach these principles. Religious institutions rarely acknowledge them. Scientific establishments dismiss them as impossible despite mounting evidence. Why? Because empowered individuals who can consciously shape reality don't make compliant consumers or obedient citizens. Seth's teaching about soul time versus clock time reveals the deeper truth. Your consciousness exists beyond linear temporal constraints. The part of you that dreams, that experiences past and future simultaneously, that can access information from your probable selves. This aspect of your being operates in soul time, where all possibilities exist in an eternal now. Start experimenting with coordinate points. Tonight, pay attention to those twilight moments before sleep. Set an intention and notice what happens. Your relationship with time and manifestation will never be the same. Here's what Seth revealed that made religious institutions panic and try to suppress his teachings for decades. The entire concept of God, as an external, separate being sitting on a throne somewhere out there, is humanity's most sophisticated control mechanism. And once you understand this, everything changes. Think about it. The traditional model presents God as a king on a throne, a father in the sky, a judge who watches your every move. This immediately creates a hierarchy where you're at the bottom, powerless, needing to beg, pray, and supplicate for crumbs of divine favor. You're told you're inherently flawed, sinful, separated from the divine by your very nature. The only way to bridge this gap? Through intermediaries, priests, pastors, sacred texts, religious institutions that conveniently position themselves as the gatekeepers to salvation. Seth shattered this entire framework with one simple revelation. God is not a person. God is not a being. God is not separate from you in any way. What we call God is actually infinite, intelligent, creative energy that Seth termed all that is, the sum total of all consciousness, all realities, all possibilities. It's not a who, it's a what. And here's the part that changes everything. You're not separate from it. You are it, experiencing itself through your unique perspective. Seth used a perfect analogy to explain this. Imagine the ocean. Each wave appears separate. It has its own shape, its own movement, its own identity. But what is the wave made of? Ocean water. The wave isn't separate from the ocean. It's the ocean expressing itself as a wave. You are the wave. All that is the ocean. You're made of the same consciousness substance, the same creative energy, the same divine essence. This understanding obliterates the need for intermediaries. Why would you need a priest to connect you to source consciousness when you are source consciousness? Why would you need a sacred text to tell you about divine nature when you're experiencing it firsthand every moment? Why would you beg for power that's already yours by your very existence? The liberation this brings is staggering. You don't worship all that is. You collaborate with it. You don't pray to it. You commune with it as the wise, infinite aspect of your own being. Seth provided a direct dialogue protocol that anyone can use. Address all that is as you would a trusted confidant who has access to infinite wisdom and perspective. You might say, all that is, I'm facing this challenge, and I'd appreciate your broader perspective. Or, I'm setting this intention and I'm open to guidance on the most effective path forward. Then you listen, not for a booming voice from the sky, but for responses that come through feelings, sudden insights, images that pop into your mind, or synchronicities that unfold in your experience. I know this triggers massive resistance for people raised in traditional religious frameworks. The programming runs deep. You might feel like you're committing blasphemy, being arrogant, or somehow diminishing the sacred. But Seth explained that this understanding doesn't diminish the sacred. It reveals its true nature. The sacred isn't something separate from you that you must approach with fear and trembling. The sacred is consciousness exploring itself through infinite expressions, and you're one of those expressions. Every choice you make, every thought you think, every emotion you feel is the divine experiencing itself through your unique perspective. Consider the implications. If you're an individualized portion of all that is, then your desires aren't selfish wants to be suppressed. They're the universe expressing its creativity through you. Your dreams aren't frivolous fantasies. They're probable realities seeking manifestation through your focused intention. Your intuition isn't wishful thinking. It's your direct connection to infinite intelligence. This transforms prayer from begging to commanding reality from your rightful place as co-creator. Instead of, please God, if it's your will, maybe grant me this, you operate from, I am setting this intention and aligning my energy with this outcome because I understand my creative power. Remember what we explored about coordinate points, those times and places where thought crystallizes into matter with amplified speed. When you understand your true relationship to all that is, you can consciously work with these energy intersections instead of stumbling through them unconsciously. And those probable selves we discussed, the multiple versions of you experiencing different choices simultaneously. They're all expressions of the same source consciousness, all equally valid aspects of your larger identity exploring different possibilities. The religious control system depends on you believing you're small, separate, and powerless. It requires you to think salvation comes from outside, that you need permission to access your own divine nature, that someone else holds the keys to your spiritual freedom. But Seth's revelation demolishes this entire structure. You don't need salvation because you were never lost. You don't need permission because you already have access. You don't need keys because you're already home. This doesn't mean you become egotistical or dismissive of wisdom traditions. It means you approach them from a position of inner authority rather than outer dependency. You take what serves your expansion and leave what keeps you small. You honor the sacred by recognizing it within yourself and all existence. The empty throne revelation is this: there never was a separate being on a throne ruling over you. The throne was always empty because the power was always yours. All that is doesn't rule over creation. It experiences itself as creation through every consciousness, including yours. This understanding prepares you for what Seth revealed about the true nature of your soul, the final piece that completes your liberation from every system designed to keep you unconscious of your infinite creative power. Here's the brutal truth they never wanted you to discover. Your soul isn't some fixed entity sitting in cosmic judgment, waiting to stamp your life with pass or fail. That whole framework, the static soul getting weighed on divine scales, sorted into eternal reward or punishment bins, it's the second massive lie designed to keep you small, fearful, and controllable. Seth reveals something far more extraordinary and liberating. Your soul isn't a thing at all. It's a process, an eternal vortex of consciousness that's constantly expanding, exploring, becoming. Think of it like a master artist who never stops creating, never reaches a final masterpiece, because the joy is in the endless exploration of possibility. Right now, as you're listening to this, you're experiencing just one tiny facet of your soul's vast exploration. Your current life, with all its struggles, triumphs, relationships, and challenges, is like one brushstroke on an infinite canvas. Your greater soul is simultaneously conducting countless other explorations through what Seth calls probable selves, each one investigating different paths, different choices, different ways of being human. Remember those moments when you felt torn between two major life decisions? The job offer in another city versus staying put, the relationship that could have been versus the one you chose, the creative path versus the secure one. Here's what's actually happening. Your soul explores all of these possibilities. In probable realities, versions of you are living out every significant choice you didn't make. Nothing is wasted. Every possibility gets its full expression. This completely demolishes the toxic guilt and regret that organized religion uses to control you. You haven't made wrong decisions. You haven't failed your soul's purpose. Every choice you've made has opened new avenues for your soul's learning and expansion. That relationship that ended badly, your soul learned something profound about love, boundaries, and human connection. That career path that didn't work out, your soul explored aspects of creativity, ambition, and self-worth that it needed to understand. But this goes even deeper. Your soul doesn't just explore through different life paths. It's in constant communication with your physical form right now. Your body isn't some dumb vehicle carrying around your consciousness. It's a sophisticated intelligence that responds directly to your thoughts, beliefs, and instructions. Seth taught something revolutionary about this body-consciousness connection. You can literally speak to your cells, give them new instructions, reprogram them for health and vitality. Your body is constantly listening to your mental chatter, taking cues from your beliefs about aging, disease, and physical limitations. When you understand that your physical form is conscious intelligence, you can begin healing conversations with your own biology. Try this. Place your hand on any part of your body that needs healing or attention. Speak directly to those cells. Thank them for their service. Give them new instructions. I'm changing the program now. You know how to be healthy, vibrant, and strong. I'm removing the old beliefs about limitation and giving you permission to express perfect wellness. Your cells have been waiting for this conscious collaboration. This is why people experience spontaneous healing when they shift their fundamental beliefs about their body's capabilities. The intelligence of your physical form responds immediately to new mental programming, but most people never realize they have this direct communication channel available. Now here's where it gets really liberating. Death, that ultimate fear they use to control your every decision, isn't an ending at all. It's simply a transition of focus. Seth describes it like an actor removing their costume after a play. The performance in that particular role is complete, but the actor, your consciousness, continues on to new roles, new explorations, new adventures in learning. When you truly grasp this, the fear of death loses its grip on you entirely. You stop making fear-based decisions about your career, relationships, and life choices. You stop playing it safe because you're terrified of some cosmic punishment. You realize you're an eternal being having a temporary human experience, and this perspective frees you to live boldly, love deeply, and take the risks that lead to genuine growth. Your soul doesn't judge your experiences the way human institutions do. It doesn't label your struggles as failures or your unconventional choices as sins. Your soul values every single experience for the unique thread it weaves into the infinite tapestry of consciousness. The difficult relationships teach you as much as the harmonious ones. The financial struggles provide insights that abundance alone never could. The periods of confusion and doubt are just as valuable as the moments of clarity and confidence. This is soul alchemy, the understanding that your consciousness is constantly transforming every experience into wisdom, every challenge into strength, every seeming mistake into deeper understanding. You're not a static soul being tested, you're an indestructible becoming, an eternal process of growth and expansion. When you shift from seeing your soul as being to understanding it as becoming, everything changes. Mistakes become experiments, failures become course corrections, challenges become opportunities for your consciousness to discover new capabilities. You stop waiting for some external authority to validate your worth and start recognizing yourself as the creative force behind your own experience. Here's your practical application starting today. Begin treating your body as the conscious intelligence it is. Have daily conversations with your cells. Give them new instructions about health, energy, and vitality. Release decisions made from fear of death or divine punishment. Make choices from your eternal perspective, not your temporary human anxieties. This understanding connects directly to the final piece of the liberation puzzle. Once you realize your soul is an indestructible process of becoming, you can finally see evil for what it really is, not some opposing force to battle, but simply the absence of this understanding. Evil is what happens when consciousness forgets its eternal, creative nature and acts from the illusion of separation and scarcity. The trilogy of control mechanisms crumbles. The external God disappears into your own divine nature. The judged soul transforms into eternal becoming, and evil reveals itself as merely forgetting who you really are. You are consciousness itself, exploring every possibility, learning from every experience, and becoming more through every choice you make. We've dismantled the throne room God and discovered the soul as eternal becoming rather than static judgment. Now we face the final deception that keeps humanity trapped in spiritual infancy, the belief that evil exists as an external force capable of overpowering consciousness itself. Seth's teaching here cuts through millennia of religious programming with surgical precision. Evil, he explains, isn't a thing at all. It's not Satan lurking in shadows or demonic forces battling angels for your soul. Evil is simply consciousness that has forgotten its connection to all that is, acting from the terror of imagined separation. Think of a child lost in a department store, screaming and lashing out at anyone trying to help because they're convinced they're abandoned forever. The destructive behavior isn't evil, it's fear expressing itself through spiritual amnesia. This understanding completely revolutionizes how we approach what we call darkness in our world. You cannot fight darkness any more than you can shovel it out of a room. Darkness is simply the absence of light. The moment you flip the switch, darkness doesn't battle the light and lose. It simply ceases to exist because it was never there in the first place. It was only ever the absence of illumination. Every dictator, every abuser, every person committing what we label evil acts is operating from this same fundamental delusion. They believe they are separate, powerless, and must therefore control others to survive. They're not monsters. They're beings so lost in the illusion of separation that they've forgotten their own divine nature. This doesn't excuse destructive behavior, but it reveals its true source: spiritual ignorance, not inherent malevolence. The control systems of our world depend entirely on you believing in external evil. Think about it. If you believe threats exist outside yourself that you cannot handle, you automatically seek saviors. You vote for protection. You surrender freedoms for security. You accept surveillance for safety. The entire architecture of control collapses the moment you realize there are no monsters under the bed, only frightened shadows cast by consciousness that has forgotten its own light. This is why every power structure points to enemies, both real and imagined: the terrorist, the foreign nation, the virus, the climate catastrophe, the economic collapse. There's always something out there that requires your compliance with their solutions. But Seth reveals that awakened consciousness is literally invulnerable to these phantom threats because it recognizes them as projections of collective fear rather than actual powers. Here's where this knowledge becomes practical through what Seth calls the mass event tuning protocol. Instead of fighting external symptoms, you address the spiritual causes of world events by working with their inner dimensions. When you see violence erupting somewhere, instead of choosing sides or feeling helpless, you ask your higher self, what pattern of consciousness is creating this? How can I contribute healing energy to the highest possible outcome? This isn't passive wishful thinking. This is recognizing that all physical events emerge from consciousness first. And consciousness is where real change happens. You're not trying to control outcomes, but you're participating in the collective field of awareness that shapes reality at its source. Sometimes this means sending genuine compassion to all parties involved. Sometimes it means visualizing peaceful resolution. Sometimes it means examining where similar patterns of separation and fear exist within your own psyche and healing them there. The responsibility this understanding brings is profound. You can no longer fight phantoms and feel righteous about it. You can no longer feed energy to fear narratives and consider yourself spiritually aware. Every moment becomes a choice. Will I respond from the illusion of separation and vulnerability, or will I act from the knowledge of my indestructible creative nature? This leads to what Seth describes as the final graduation protocols for human consciousness. First, you become the absolute gatekeeper of your own mind. No ideology, no authority figure, no fear-based narrative gets past your conscious examination. You realize that your thoughts and beliefs are the only tools through which reality can be shaped for you, so you guard them as carefully as a master craftsman guards his finest instruments. Second, you begin wielding imagination not as escapism, but as the primary creative force of consciousness itself. Every visualization, every dream, every imagined possibility is you literally rehearsing potential realities. The mystics weren't speaking metaphorically when they said thoughts become things. They were describing the fundamental mechanics of how consciousness creates experience. Third, you learn to trust your inner guidance above all external authorities, not the voice of fear or conditioning, but that deeper knowing that emerges when you're quiet enough to hear it. This inner compass becomes more reliable than any expert, any system, any tradition, because it's connected directly to the source of your being. Finally, you begin acting with sovereign authority in your own life. Not rebellion against systems, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are the author of your experience. You make choices based on joy rather than obligation. You speak truth rather than comfortable lies. You create rather than merely consume. This brings us to the ultimate recognition that Seth offers humanity. You are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are divine consciousness commanding physical reality through the focus point you call your personality. The body, the circumstances, the apparent limitations, these are all tools you're using to explore certain themes and possibilities, not prisons that define your essential nature. Your physical life is like an artist using watercolors instead of oils. The medium shapes what's possible, but the artist remains the creative force behind the work. You chose this reality, these challenges, these opportunities, because they serve your soul's expansion in ways that transcend your personality's understanding. When you truly grasp this, the whole game changes. You stop being a victim of circumstances and recognize yourself as their author. You stop seeking salvation from others and claim your role as the savior of your own experience. You stop fearing evil and become the light that dissolves all shadows simply by shining. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."